What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Beck Check podcast. I just had an awesome conversation with Jennifer North Morris, aka Miss No Mo. We talked all about the power of graphing technology. We talked about vertical boards and building thinking classrooms, and just overall the energy and excitement going on in her classroom. So I hope you enjoy this very first episode of the Beck Check podcast. Thanks for being the very first person on my podcast ever. How does it feel?
I'm so excited. I always thought it'd be fun to be on a podcast.
Why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself to the
All
audience,
right.
share a little bit about you and your teaching and what you're up to.
Yeah. So my name is Jennifer North Morris. They call me Ms. Nomo. Kids early on started teaching in 1991. Early on decided North Morris was way too long, so they shortened to Nomo. So I'm often, hey, Nomo. So that's a sweet, sweet term of endearment for me. Like I said, I've been in and out of the classroom since '91. Currently, I teach at Marana High School, and that's kind of a fun story, actually. I taught for 11 years in California. So I taught in San Diego and then up in Santa Rosa, California. And great. I had so much fun teaching anything. I taught everything except for AP Calc. I've never taught AP Calc, but I taught AP Stats. You had asked me how I got into consulting, I think.
Yeah.
And I piloted a program. It was called Graphing Calculator Enhanced Advanced Algebra or something like that. And it was back in the day, we didn't have graphing calculators, so they were new. It was really exciting. The first pre-calculus class I taught was probably the second year of teaching, and we had graphing calculators, and I had never had one before. And so the whole transformations of functions was mind-blowing with graphing technology, because I think I had more fun with the kid than the kids, because I was like, okay, let's graph a quadratic, y equals x squared. How would you shift it up one, right? And the kids were like, oh, you just add one to the equation. Like, it was so exciting for me. And then we would be doing some crazy polynomial, and I'm like, wait. And I think that's when I realized that a factored form of polynomial was like so easy to change the zeros, right? Like, what? Like, I had no idea, because seriously, we would have to plot them point by point by point. So you really couldn't talk about, hey, like, what's the end behavior of polynomials? It was like so surreal. It's like, okay, memorize this. But then when you have graphing calculator technology, or now Desmos, oh my gosh, it makes so much sense. But anyway, so I piloted this program, and I knew the authors were private school teachers, and I had classes of 36, 35, and I would write, this is great. This has worked really well, blah, blah, blah. This is what it looked like in class. This never works with classes of 40. And I would write all this stuff. Well, they used to have these cool institutes in summer for math teachers. Like, they'd have them all over the country. And so they had one in Berkeley, and I got to go up, and it was for this book and this great, it was like experiential discovery mathematics. And the editor came, it was given by the authors, and the editor came up to me and said, are you Jennifer North Morris? Like, you've been piloting this program? And I'm like, oh my gosh, do the authors know who I am? I was so embarrassed, because I was so profuse with my stuff. And they said, hey, we would really like you to come and help the authors present this material to teachers that are thinking about using it. That hit it off. I mean, I started presenting, and I started doing PD throughout the country. So it was a fluke. Like, I piloted some stuff, was really honest with my feedback. And then I did consulting for probably 15 years. And so when I wanted to stay home with my kids, this is another interesting thing, is when I was pregnant, I asked every female teacher I saw who had kids. And I said two things. I said, one, did you stay home? And what did you think with your kids, right? And I got two answers. One was, I stayed home, and it was the hardest job I ever had, but I never regretted it. The other one is, I couldn't stay home, but I wish I could have. And
Mhm.
so I stayed home for 12 years or so. But
Yeah.
I got to do consulting on the side. So I got to go present at all these math conferences all over the country and got to work with schools. So I kind of was connected, but the whole cell phone thing, like it was new. Like I had no idea. Get to know,
Yeah.
like if you're piloting things or you're playing with new things, give feedback, through social media or even connecting through emails. But
Mhm.
how I got at Marana High School is my daughter, who was, gosh, 10 at the time, I think she said, Mommy, can you stop traveling so much? Because I was
Oh,
gone, consulting. And so I went to the welcome freshmen, we always have something in the spring welcoming the prospective students in. And I went to that with my son. And the vibe at Marana High School was amazing. And my
mm,
neighbors had been talking to me for a long time. Jen, why don't you go teach math? We need math teachers at Marana High School. And I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. The vibe was amazing. And that night I was like, I wonder if they have any openings. And they had four math teacher openings.
wow.
And this was 8 years ago. And so that's why I applied. And I was like, oh, let's try teaching again. And so that's how I got back to Marana High School. So, like I said, I've been there for 8 years. Currently, I teach automotive math, which is GTM 105, math for the trades through PIMA. And then I also teach college algebra and pre-calculus, trigonometry, which is they're also PIMA classes. But I was Algebra 1 teacher for years and years and years, but I'm the only one who's certified to teach PIMA courses. And so that's why I have all the PIMA classes. But it's super fun. I have a great time doing that. So,
Well, that's very cool. Yeah, and I'm glad that I've been able to teach a PIMA class kind of alongside with you and kind of look at the different things that you've posted. It's been awesome. Kind of going back to what you were just talking about with the Desmos and the graphing calculators and how that kind of opened up a whole new world of polynomials and stuff. Do you think, or has that experience that you had with the graphing technology impacted the way that you teach now?
oh my gosh, it's a huge thing. And I know one of the things that you and I talk about a lot is vertical boards,
Yeah.
right? We're using vertical boards. We're up there, and it's, as I'm sure you will share over and over again, it's amazing.
Mhm.
Every kid is involved. They're working in their groups of three. They're up there. They're trading the markers without us even asking, right? And they're each
Right.
taking turns. You kind of go over. You're like, hey, have oh yeah, he just did the last problem, and it's just such a fascinating thing to do. And then with that, and kind of bringing in the graphic, I've been experimenting with that. Like, how do you do Desmos when you're on the vertical boards, right? And so,
Mhm. Mhm.
so sometimes it's we'll get on the vertical boards, do some algebraic thinking, or some discovery of these properties, and then we'll come back in those same groups and actually dive into some graphing calculator stuff or some Desmos technology. Um, I think almost all the topics in our college algebra class, Algebra 2, Algebra 1,
Mhm.
can benefit from thinking about the graph. I think it was, gosh, not in college, probably my third year of teaching, that I realized that when you solve an equation, let's say x squared minus 5x equals 3, that if you graph each side of the equation, the solution is where they intersect. Like it was mind boggling. Maybe it's because when I was in school, we didn't have the ability to look at graphs. But I think that's something that I think we skip. And it's
Mhm.
something really important that we need to make sure our students realize that, hey, there's a graphical representation in addition to an algebraic, in addition to some kind of real world application. Like there's reasons for all of these. So
Right.
I
And I
think,
think that really shows that a student knows what they're talking about, or they understand the concept if you can connect to all of these different mathematical representations. And I also
yeah,
think that's drive home what the real conceptual knowledge is of what you're talking about, right? Because
right.
we can do all the algebra, but then as soon as you start connecting it to the graph, like today, in my Algebra 1 class, we were teaching systems of equations. And so recently we've been going through the substitution method, the elimination method, and usually I start with the graph, but this year I started with the algebra because I wanted them to I wanted them to get the payoff at the very end, where it's like, oh, you've been struggling with the substitution, you've been struggling with this elimination. Well, check out what you can do with this. And so many students were like, oh, that's what we've been doing this whole
Right.
time. Yeah. So like you said, I think it is important to incorporate that representation in there, so the students can get that conceptual understanding of what's happening.
Yeah. And I think even down to the real world meaning of slope. I know that's an Algebra 1 standard that sometimes is really hard to get across. Like, what does it mean? Well, if you look at the graphs, I keep telling the kids, like, what are the units on the y-axis? What are the units on the x-axis, right? Like, oh, it's these units per these units. Like, it's, thinking about that graphical representation of slope, it's more than just up, over, right? It's also
Mm-hmm.
these, we're talking about these scales, these units, and that's how you see that rate of change. So yeah, I don't know.
Right, and comparing, right? And comparing the different
Yeah,
types
yeah,
of measures, there are
exactly.
different things you can tell too. So
Exactly.
the combination of this Desmos that we're doing, we're talking about polynomial end behavior, we're talking about how the power of graphical representation kind of combined with this energy in the vertical board. So would you say like that's what the exciting things going on in your classroom?
Yeah, I think that's the exciting thing that the whole idea of random groups, I've been a huge proponent of random groups for a long time,
Mm.
but what's interesting this year is, we'll go to the vertical boards. When we go to vertical boards, they're randomized, they get to work right away. Every once in a while, I would say, okay, let's just not, I wouldn't randomize our groups and they would go sit wherever they go. Dude, I swear they worked less. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't just because they socialized, but they just weren't focused. And so when I did, there's some times where we're not going to work vertical boards. If I randomize them and put them in pairs or put them in trios and sit them down, they work. Like, it's so interesting. And I also shared with you is that every year before, because we've been Chromebooks 1-to-1 for, ever since I started at Myrna High School, we gamify, the SAMR
Mm-hmm.
model, thinking about gamify. It's a nice way to review and that sort of thing. So the kids are all excited about Kahoot and GimKit and challenging, that kind of thing. Now that these kids are working together all the time, there isn't that element of competition. They really would rather work together and help each other. And they're not worried about who's first, who's second. It's really interesting that I've seen that in my classroom. So it's really exciting. All the new things. It's funny. I mean, I've been in education since 91 and it's still new, right? And I think that's what keeps you fresh as a teacher. You got to try new things. You got
Yeah.
to, dive in. Is it work? Yeah, it's a lot more work. It's very different. But you have to keep engaged and keep doing that. So
I think that's part of the beauty of teaching is the fact that we can keep changing and tweaking and trying new things,
yeah,
That's
yeah.
what I find so interesting for me in my experience too. Not, I have not been teaching nearly as long as you have, but just I know even just from year to year, finding those different tweaks and changes. How do you randomize the groups in your class? What do you do?
So, we just went to that math. We went to CMC South,
Right. Yeah.
um, and so I've used Flippity. I've used another. I used some online, different ones. I've used cards, so I kind of switch it up, different
Mhm.
ones. But it is true. It's what is it? Visual. What does he say?
Visibly random
visibly
groups. Yeah.
visibly random groups. I mean, so it has to be something they'll know. If it's already up there, they're like, so it's either changing. My friend Kathleen, who I'm sure she would love to be interviewed by you and be on the podcast,
Oh, cool.
she does flippity, and she'll do the spinner. You know how the spinner comes up? She'd be like,
Yeah.
who's my favorite person today? And she'll do that, and then that person gets to determine how many times she does the groups,
Oh,
random groups.
really?
So she
That's
makes it
great.
super fun, kind of thing. We've
That's super
tried
fun.
cards. I don't know, even though I have older students, they're still swapping their cards. It drives me crazy. So today because at our school, we try to be outside the classroom, just
Mhm.
to say hi. It's like a luxury because, some teachers are like, don't make me be at the door. Oh, I love it. You get to say hi to people coming by and everything. But this today I was at my door watching them, making sure they weren't changing cards inside. So I'm still learning. How about you? What do you do?
Yeah, I ever since the talk, when he talked about the flippity thing, where he was saying that, well, when you do flippity, all of a sudden you'll hear groans in the class,
Mm-hmm.
and how
Yeah.
for the teacher to you, it's like, okay, whatever, get over it, go to
Yeah.
your team. Versus, but how about that student who hears the groan,
Yeah.
right? Who
Yeah. Yeah.
hears, oh, there's a student who saw that I was paired up with them, and now they're complaining about it. And so when he said that, that really made me kind of rethink a
Yeah.
little bit with the flippity. However, doing the flippity live and watching them react as you click the button is hilarious. So
It
I
is
would just
huge.
say for anyone, just do that just to see the reaction. You just can
Yeah.
go nuts. But
Well, I
um,
think one thing for me in that class is I have a playlist, like a class playlist. So we play music.
hmm,
And one of the things that my class always does is a song will come on. And this happens in every class, no matter what age level, a song will come on, and one or two kids will go, ah, and I stop them right there. And I'm like, you
hmm,
guys, you don't know. This is someone's favorite song. And by you reacting that way, and this always happens like first, second week at school, you reacting that way, it doesn't make them feel good. And so I
hmm,
think that was one thing in my class. We didn't get the groans because of that,
that's
because we
awesome.
had already talked about that. Like, don't talk. I mean, they do tease me, and they put one of Taylor Swift's Christmas songs on there like 25 times. So it kept coming on over and over and over again. So funny little story. But
Wait, talk to me about this playlist. What's the playlist?
so I love music. I really love music. And my friend John Beret, who we lost way too early. He was my former student teacher,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
we used to present all the time. One of the things he always had was music as he's come in the classroom, music as we come to a presentation. It's just, it's the vibe. It makes people happy. If you've ever been to a concert, people are happy, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so I have the bounty, I have Apple Music. And so the kids get to suggest songs for our playlist, and which is playing either when they come in the classroom, or when we're working on an assignment or practicing problems, whatever. Um, so they get to submit a song. And then I have my TA look through all the lyrics, check to
Right.
make sure it's not
Yeah.
an explicit version, make sure they don't have, and then it gets in the playlist, and then it's played in class. So
Oh,
yeah,
that's super fun.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is
that's
super
really
fun.
cool. Yeah.
But you have to be careful because there's an explicit version, there's a non-explicit version, but sometimes it plays. So it's like, no, if it even has one explicit version, no.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll play lo-fi hip hop when they
Yeah.
walk in. And I've
Yeah.
noticed sometimes if they come in with a lot of energy, they hear the lo-fi, it just kind of
Yeah.
settles them in a little bit, just playing that kind of in the background. Or sometimes if they're
Uh,
working in groups, but for whatever reason it gets quiet. Sometimes that happens in my,
yeah.
especially in my first period when students are still a little bit asleep. And so kind of
And they
having
won't talk. Yeah.
can be nice. Um, But yeah, that is really good, right? Kind of setting up those norms in your classroom from
Yeah.
day one, kind of nipping the groaning thing in the bud.
Yeah.
And that's definitely conversations that I've had with them. I've started using cards now at the door, and I have noticed that they'll switch cards. And so one day I said, "Show me your card." And so then they had to show me their card before they walked in.
Yeah.
And so then I knew what number it was. And of course, I'm not going to know every single student's card number.
Right.
Those one or two students that I'm pretty sure switch cards every time, you can remember and then make
Yeah.
sure that it works out. What I've actually started doing is hanging out in the hallway too. That's what we do at Mountain View. But now I'm not letting them come in the door until like 2 minutes before it starts. And so
Yeah.
I'll have a problem already up on my board as they walk in and I hand them the card. So I just have them set their stuff down and go straight to their board and start on
Cool.
the problem that I have displayed. And I've
Cool.
noticed that it's really helped me because I know we're supposed to, as part of the building thinking, launch within the first 5 minutes. And man, I struggle with that. Just to get them going, to get them up into the groups all within 5 minutes because there's just so much, I don't know, so
Yeah.
much going on.
Yeah.
And so I've noticed I have them come in, they set their bag down, and they just go straight to their group and get started on what I like to call the Beck work instead
Yeah.
of the bell
I
work.
love that.
That's what they call it, Beck work. And then the name Beck check, where that comes from, is at the very end of class. I do my check for understanding.
Perfect.
So I'm
That's
like,
so
oh,
cool.
you got to do the Beck check,
Yeah.
which is just fun stuff to do with your name.
That's cool.
But I've
How do
noticed
you,
that's helped.
yeah, how do you do the check at the end? Like, are they still at the boards? Is it just, does it vary? How is your check? What do you do?
So we'll do the thin slicing, do the problems, and then we'll consolidate. And that's definitely the piece that I still need to work on. I can have a whole nother podcast
Same.
talking
Yeah.
about that. But then at the end, we'll take our notes, and I'll say, take your notes, and then I say, prepare for the Beck check. So then I have them all seated for the last
Mhm.
5 or 10 or so minutes of
Cool.
class to be seated and then do the Beck check. And I've started doing mild, medium, and spicy at the very end
Cool.
for that. Kind of like the check your understanding questions, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
To get started on it, and saying choose one to start. So then
Cool.
you need to say choosing one to start, and I've noticed then they'll do a second problem, and then they'll do a third problem rather than just doing one. If I say choose one
Yeah.
to start, I thought that was so interesting from Peter's talk when he was talking about the psychology
Yeah.
of human behavior and how so much of what you say and do and the things you're doing affects the kind of the psyche of why people do
Yeah.
things. And now that is the stuff that I kind of want to get. I'd be curious in reading more if he releases anything more on that. But that's
Yeah.
what I found super interesting from his talk.
Super cool. Yeah.
Well, anything else? Any other highlights, things to share from your classroom this year? Any other final comments?
I was thinking of a funny story. You said, what a funny
Oh, yeah.
story, right? So I have a tech. So I'm in a new classroom this year. And so and we have two teachers. So she teaches first, second, I teach 3, 4, 5, 6 in that classroom. And so we have two computers and we have to, our computer goes up to get what is it called? Docked, right? And we couldn't get the sound to work, right? At the beginning of the year. It's like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? Unmute, mute, whatever. Da, da, da. We couldn't figure it out. So finally we did a tech request. So embarrassing. He's coming in, he's looked at our computer, looked at all the connectors. Da, da, da. The mute button was on the remote and he just turned it up. That's the funniest story. But I think it was also nice today when I had the Pima guy come in observe me, and he said it's just so nice to see laughter and joy in a math classroom, and that is key. And you and I both know that that's how the kids are going to learn math, is because they enjoy being there. Is it tough at times? Yes. But we have support of not only our fellow classmates, but our teacher loves us and wants us to be there. And we want to help them in any way possible. So I think that's the biggest thing, is love your kids. We do. We love our kids. And so.
Yeah. Wow, that's fantastic. I can't think of a better note to end it on. Well, thank you for being on my first ever podcast. It really means a lot. So that was really fun.
All right. Well, let me know if you want me to put you in touch with some other people. And it was great chatting with you.